I don't remember exactly when the whispers started, but I recall the first sting of disbelief like a frigid wind against my skin. I was 27, freshly graduated from law school, energized by the promise of justice and a career that would shape my life. Then came the diagnosis, a rare autoimmune disorder that attacked my nervous system in unpredictable flares. I felt my body betray me in sudden tremors, numbness creeping up my limbs, and searing pain that felt like molten metal coursing through my veins. My friends withdrew, colleagues eyed my desk with pity, and my own reflection looked foreign and fragile. Rumors spread faster than my illness itself. They said I was exaggerating to gain attention, that I staged episodes in board meetings to excuse missed deadlines. My inbox flooded with curt messages questioning my character. Are you really sick? Or just flaky? One colleague asked. Another accused me of fabricating test results for disability accommodations. Even my family fell prey to doubt. At Thanksgiving dinner, my sister leaned forward and whispered, "Maybe you just need to toughen up," as if my trembling hands were a choice I could discard like an old coat. Each word landed like a hammer blow. I tried to prove them wrong. I carried medical records, letters from neurologists, dozens of lab reports stamped with official seals. I shared videos recorded on my phone, trembling, falling in my living room, gasping for breath. But the more evidence I provided, the more skeptical they became. Anyone can edit a video, someone scoffed. My credibility crumbled under the weight of their suspicion. I felt isolated behind a glass wall, visible to doubters but unreachable in my pain. My trust in people eroded, leaving only a hardened shell determined to fight back. When my health worsened, I knew I needed help beyond prescriptions and specialist visits. I contacted a renowned disability rights lawyer in Chicago, a firm known for tackling discrimination cases against powerful corporations. I hoped he could hold my employer accountable for the harassment and hostile environment. I imagined him standing beside me in court, exposing the cruelty of those who mocked my suffering. I drafted emails, collected testimonies, and sent a concise summary of my ordeal. But even as I prepared, my body crumbled further. The tremors intensified, and my speech sometimes slurred unexpectedly. One evening, I sat at my desk after a brutal flare left me gasping in bed for hours. I typed my final message to the lawyer, pouring every ounce of rage and despair into the words. I described how they'd questioned my humanity, how each doubt felt like a personal betrayal, and how I trembled not only from the illness but from heartbreak. My fingers hovered over the send button. Then I pressed it. In that moment I felt a surge of hope, believing my truth would finally find an ally. Hours passed with no response. My phone lay mute beside my wheelchair. I drifted in and out of sleep, each dream haunted by faces twisted in doubt. When I woke, I reached for the phone, but the screen stared back blank. Panic surged through me. I fumbled for the power button. It clicked, but the display remained dark. I realized I had left it charging unplugged. The small oversight felt cosmic, as if every force in the universe wanted me silenced. The next morning, I learned that the lawyer's firm had sent me a confirmation. They received my message late at night and would review my case as a priority. Relief washed over me for a fleeting moment. Then came the sharp twist. They said my story shocked them, that they had rarely encountered such systematic cruelty. They promised to fight on my behalf, to bring my persecutors to justice. I cried tears of gratitude, relief, and exhaustion. My body shook from the strain of emotion, the tremors amplified by adrenaline. For the first time, I felt less alone, but even as hope bloomed, I felt the tremors morph into something darker. My vision blurred, and an icy dread settled in my chest. I realized the fight was far from over. The path ahead would be rocky, littered with skepticism, legal hurdles, and the unpredictable nature of my disease. Yet, for the first time in months, I believed I had an advocate. I believed my voice, finally heard by someone with the power to challenge those who had dismissed me. Now, as I brace for the next phase of this battle, I hold on to that moment of connection with my lawyer. I keep his final message pinned to my corkboard, a lifeline in ink and pixels. It reads like a vow, an unspoken promise that someone believes me. My body may be fragile, my health uncertain, but this message ignites a stubborn spark inside me. I will use that spark to fuel my resolve, to rise above the doubt, and to reclaim the dignity they tried to steal. And when the day comes to stand before a judge, I will carry that spark with me, illuminating the truth they fought so hard to bury. Every morning begins with the same ritual. I wake before dawn, each muscle protesting with phantom tremors as if my body remembers every betrayal it has suffered. I steady myself on the edge of the bed, breathe deeply, and force my legs to carry me toward the bathroom. The mirror reflects a woman I barely recognize, hollow cheeks, dark circles under my eyes, and hair that refuses to hold any shape. Yet behind the weariness, my eyes burn with determination. The lawyer's message still glows on my phone screen, a beacon that guides me through the haze of pain and doubt. I draft a detailed timeline of every incident of harassment. The mocking laughter when I spilled coffee after an episode. The whispered jokes about fake fainting spells behind closed doors. The HR manager who told me we don't see illness like yours every day. I attach medical bills, doctor's notes, transcripts of voicemails left by coworkers demanding proof of my disability. My hand trembles as I type, but I refuse to stop until I have every scrap of evidence in place. Saying it out loud that will not be silenced anchors me. I send the packet to my lawyer, watching the spinner turn on the screen as if my life depends on it. Because it does, the response comes faster than I expect. He commends the thoroughness of the documentation and reveals he's already filed a motion to compel my employer to produce internal communications. I allow myself a fleeting smile before the tremors remind me that joy is a luxury I cannot afford. He warns me the next steps will be grueling. Depositions, medical evaluations by company-hired experts, and the looming threat of public scrutiny. I feel the weight of every eye that might turn to me, ready to question my motives once again. But I steel myself. I will stand firm under that intense glare. Days blur together as I prepare for my deposition. I memorize every detail of my medical history, every date of every appointment, rehearsing each answer until I can recite it without trembling. The tremors are still there, sometimes in my voice, sometimes in my hands, but I learn to mask them with controlled breathing. My speech therapist teaches me pacing techniques so that even when my throat constricts, I sound composed. I practice in front of the mirror, in front of my hospital bed, in front of my empty living room. I imagine the opposing counsel leaning forward, pen poised to strike at the first sign of weakness. I refuse to give him that satisfaction. On the day of the deposition, I arrive at the firm's gleaming offices in Chicago, wheelchair carefully folded and stowed in the car. The building's lobby smells of polished wood and conditioned air. I feel like an intruder in my own fight. My lawyer meets me with a firm handshake and a reassuring nod. "You're ready," he tells me. I nod back, though inside I tremble with a cocktail of fear and adrenaline. We step into the conference room, where a long table stretches out like a battlefield. On one side, the company's attorneys glower across at me. Their lead counsel is a woman known for her aggressive tactics and cutting remarks. She offers a curt greeting and sets a stack of papers in front of her. The questioning begins with polite inquiries. My name, my address, my diagnosis. I answer clearly, citing the specialized tests that confirmed my condition. Then she shifts tone, pressing for specifics. What medications I take, how often I experience flares, whether I've ever exaggerated symptoms to avoid obligations. Each question feels like a landmine. I answer truthfully but concisely, leaning on my lawyer when the counsel tries to trap me in contradictory statements. At times I feel tears sting my eyes, but I swallow them back. When my voice wavers, I pause, take a breath, and begin again. The room falls silent under the weight of my resolve. After hours of questioning, the deposition ends. I push my chair out of the building, blinking against the sun. My lawyer catches up to me and wraps a supportive arm around my shoulders. "You did exceptionally well," he says. Relief and exhaustion wash over me in equal measure. I want to collapse into his embrace, but I remind myself that this is only one battle in a long war. Tomorrow, I will face another, maybe a medical evaluation by the company's chosen neurologist, someone who will scrutinize me under fluorescent lights and probably accuse me of malingering. But tonight, I allow myself to rest, back at home. I collapse onto the couch and stare at the ceiling. My phone buzzes with a new message from my lawyer. The motion to compel has been granted. The judge agreed that the company must produce relevant emails and internal reports. It feels like a small victory, but it's exactly the boost I need. I reply with gratitude, then stare at the screen until the words blur. My body twitches uncontrollably for a moment, and I close my eyes, willing the tremors to fade. They don't. Of course, they never fully go away, but I have learned to live with them, to draw strength from the fight instead of letting the fight break me. That night, I dream of a courtroom where I stand alone at the podium. The judge's gavel pounds down as I recount every moment of ridicule and pain. I speak with a voice that echoes in every corner of the chamber. When I finish, the court erupts in applause, something I have never heard in real life. I wake before the final clap, heart pounding, grateful for the illusion of vindication. In the harsh light of morning, the real battle awaits, but I carry the echo of that dream with me. Every fiber of my being aches, yet I feel more alive than ever. The tremors remind me of my vulnerability, and the lawsuit reminds me of my strength. I know the road ahead will be uphill, strewn with objections, delays, and attempts to discredit me, but I also know the law is on my side, and I have an advocate who believes in my truth. As I wheel myself to the desk to draft my next list of questions for the company's neurologist, I whisper to my reflection, I will be heard. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I believe it. The morning of the trial dawned gray and heavy with anticipation. I woke before sunrise, my body buzzing with nervous energy despite the tremors that never ceased. I sat at my desk surrounded by stacks of notes, highlighted medical records, and printed emails from co-workers mocking my condition. My hands shook not only from the illness but from the gravity of what lay ahead. Today, I would stand in a courtroom and demand vindication. My lawyer arrived early, dressed in a crisp suit, his voice calm as he reviewed the strategy one last time. Together, we rehearsed my testimony, reinforcing every point until it felt as rooted in me as my own heartbeat. Then we headed to the courthouse. Stepping into the courtroom felt surreal. The tall windows filtered in pale light, casting long shadows across polished wood. I wheeled myself down the aisle, my heart hammering against my ribs. The judge's bench loomed at the far end, flanked by the company's attorneys on one side, and my lawyer on the other. Spectators lined the benches, some familiar faces from the media, others simply curious. I placed my hands on the podium, reminding myself to breathe steadily. The gavel struck, and the room hushed. My lawyer delivered his opening statement with measured confidence, painting a vivid picture of my suffering and the company's callous treatment. As he spoke, I felt a strange calm settle over me. When my turn came, I wheeled forward, my documents in hand but largely unnecessary. I knew the story by heart. I looked directly at the judge and began recounting every moment of doubt cast upon me. How co-workers whispered I exaggerated my tremors, how managers demanded proof of pain, how HR dismissed medical evidence as fabrications. My voice wavered initially, but I steadied it with the same breathing techniques I had practiced for months. I described the physical agony, the isolation, the nights spent questioning my own sanity. And then I read aloud the final message I had sent to my lawyer, those raw words of despair and hope entwined in desperate prose. The courtroom was silent as I spoke. After my testimony, the company's neurologist took the stand. He spoke in clinical terms, citing tests he conducted under fluorescent lights and asserting that my condition did not meet the threshold for severe disability. He questioned the consistency of my tremors and suggested stress could account for my episodes. I watched him carefully, noticing subtle shifts in his confidence when pressed by my lawyer about the limitations of his observations and the state's own medical guidelines. My heart pounded as I realized this man stood between me and justice. But when my lawyer exposed gaps in the neurologist's methods, no long-term observation, no consideration of my unpredictable flares, their authority began to crack. The Turning point came when my lawyer called my primary neurologist back to the stand. She spoke with quiet authority, describing years of monitoring, detailed lab results, and the progressive nature of my disorder. She testified that my condition qualified as a disability under state and federal law, that my flares were genuine and debilitating, and that the company's insistence on proof had exacerbated my suffering. Her words carried weight in the hushed courtroom, and I felt tears sting my eyes as I realized my truth was finally being honored. The company's counsel frowned, unable to dismantle her testimony. The judge nodded as if absorbing each word, and I sensed a momentum shifting in my favor when closing arguments began. My lawyer's voice resonated with passion as he recounted every slight, every email questioning my integrity, every moment I had fought to be heard. He turned to the final message I had sent, my outpouring of pain and resolve, and read it aloud again, this time slower, allowing each phrase to land. They said I faked my illness, he intoned, voice steady, then cried when the lawyer read my final message. At that moment, I saw tears form in the eyes of some jurors, and even the judge's stern expression softened. The power of those words, once my private confession, became a clarion call for empathy and accountability. After hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict in my favor. The foreperson stood and announced that the company was liable for disability discrimination and must compensate me for damages, including emotional distress and legal fees. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom, followed by a muted applause. Relief and triumph surged through me so fiercely that I wept openly, the tremors forgotten as I allowed myself to feel pure victory. My lawyer placed a supportive hand on my shoulder, pride shining in his eyes. The company's attorneys packed their papers in silence, their defeat as palpable as their earlier skepticism had been. Walking out of the courthouse into the fresh air felt like rising from a long, dark dream. Reporters surrounded me, asking questions that I struggled to answer through tears of relief. I told them simply that the truth had prevailed and that no one should ever be forced to prove the reality of their suffering. Back home, I placed the judge's written ruling on my desk, alongside the printed copy of my final message that had become the beating heart of my case. I stared at those words and let myself believe in a future where my dignity was restored. The tremors remained, a reminder of my past battles, but now they felt almost insignificant compared to the walls I had broken down. Now that the final chapter is written, I look ahead at life rebuilt on my own terms. I have secured accommodations at work, planned a retreat to recover without fear of judgment, and connected with advocacy groups to help others silenced by doubt. The fight was more grueling than I ever imagined, but standing here today, I know I have forged something stronger than prejudice, a legacy of resilience. And whenever shadows of doubt reemerge, whether in my mind or from the world, I will return to that courtroom, to those words, and to the tears they inspired, as proof that even in our darkest moments, our voices can shatter the walls of disbelief.